Hello, Internet. I am John, and today I want to talk to you about Nanotech Ascension in Stellaris 4.0. The good, the bad, the ugly, and all the stuff the tooltips don't tell you. Because there's a lot of stuff in Nanotech where the tooltips really don't tell you what you need to know, and the information is kind of hard to get to. So, we'll get to the details, but first, it's kind of the big picture summary. So Nanotech is one of 3 Ascension traditions added in the Machine Age DLC for empires with a machine main species. The other 2 are Virtuality and Modularity. Virtuality is a committed tall tradition that kind of limits the number of planets that you can use effectively. Modularity is flexible and focuses mostly on improving your pops. And Nanotech is a committed wide tradition. And historically, Gestalt machines have had a number of problems playing wide effectively. I mean, one, they had empire size from planets problems, which got removed around when the Machine Age came out. And Nanotech doubles down on reducing your empire size from planets even further. So you can get down to 0% empire size from planets with Nanotech and prerogative really easily now as machines. So that helps going wide a lot. But kind of the main problem machines have historically had, or the other one, besides empire size, after that, you get over that, and then the problem that you then have is pops. If you go take some organic empire's planets, whether you're, their pops are usually not very useful to you. Unless you're in a simulator, right? If you're in a simulator, you can take those pops and use those pops at 100% efficiency, and they're awesome. But if you're playing any other kind of machine intelligence, using organic pops effectively is really hard. If you're playing in an exterminator, obviously you exterminate them, and then you have no pops. If you're playing a servitor, they become biotrophies, and you have to take care of them, and they don't really produce, right? They boost all of your robots, but if you go and conquer, 30,000 pops worth of biotrophies, that's not going to help you immediately. You have to do a lot of resettlement and management and make space for them and keep them happy. And you can't use them directly to just produce minerals and alloys or whatever. And if you're playing just kind of a regular generic machine intelligence, not one of a simulator, servitor, or exterminator, your options basically are to enslave them as grid amalgamated, which produces energy but not very pop efficiently, so you get a lot of empire size from pops for relatively low energy production plus stability problems. Or you can sell them on the slave market, but that's very micro intensive and tedious, and that also assumes the galactic market is even formed yet. Or you can purge them, possibly displacing, but ultimately purge them, and then you don't have the pops. So you have this problem where you go take planets, and if you get the pops, you can't use them very efficiently. So Nanotech kind of leans into that, and Nanotech goes, okay, fine, I don't have pops that I can use efficiently on all these planets I've taken. What am I going to do instead? So Nanotech kind of has a focus on pop-free production from a mix of mining stations and starbase economy and buildings that don't use pops to work jobs and blockers that produce resources and all this stuff that make it kind of helpful to continue to grow, continue to expand, and yeah, you're not going to get as much out of that planet as you would have if you had pops to work the jobs, but that's okay. You're still getting something out of it, and your empire size from planets is 0% with prerogative or whatever. So it's still in that game. And then the last thing that Nanotech does for wide that helps is that it potentially gives you lots of ships. One of the big draws of Nanotech is that the Nanite ships don't have any upkeep, so you can just keep building them over your naval cap as far as you want, and then just roll over people. So kind of Nanotech's general game plan to go super wide is that you build these non-pop production Nanite harvester starbase buildings, and you subsume planets to take nanites from them as well, and then you build a big nanite fleet and you go conquer everyone. And kind of the problem here is that there's actually a really long lag between when you finish the tradition and build your harvester starbases and when you can actually build a big nanite fleet. And the reason for this ties into some subtleties around the mechanics of the starbase harvester. So let's pull up one of those. Yeah. Actually, I think this was a good system over here. So this is a starbase building They're quite expensive. They're like 500 alloys, which is a lot. And what it does is it puts nanite deposits on every rocky body in the system that doesn't have a research deposit. And you can build these as soon as you get the opener to Nanotech Traditions. But they're not very good at that point, because they only add a deposit of 0.1 nanites per body. And then you can apply some mining station bonuses or whatever, but it's still not going to be a whole lot, right? You know, you could get a body with 10 or 15, a system with 10 or 15 rocky bodies in it, and you're getting like 1.5 nanites per month. And what are you going to do with 1.5 nanites per month? Not a whole lot. It isn't until the finisher on Nanotech Traditions that Harvester Starbases actually kind of get good. And this tooltip says that their yield improves every 5 years, either increasing nanite deposit size or just giving you a lump sum of nanites, and the output is limited by the size of the rocky bodies that the deposits are on. So what this doesn't tell you is how exactly those deposit improvements and lump sums scale. They double every 5 years. So it's been, 15 or 20 years since I finished Nanotech Traditions. This body here has 8x of these 0.1 deposits. So it's doubled 3 times, so it's been about 15 years, I guess, since I finished this Starbase anyway. So what this means is that, exponential growth is amazing and terrifying, right? You're starting from a very small base, but it grows and grows and grows and can potentially get really big. But the specifics of the limits based on planetary body size is very important here, because it limits the maximum nanite output of any particular body. And the deal is that basically your maximum output, if you have like a size 25 barren world that you get one of these deposits on from a harvester, the maximum nanite output is like 50 nanites per month from a single body, which is a lot more than 0.1, right? But you do the math, how many doublings does it take to get from 0.1 to 50? And the answer is quite a few. So you're not going to get there before like 50 years after you finish the tradition. So it takes a really long time for these deposits to scale up, because they start with a very low base, and they have a pretty slow doubling time, right? 50 years is a long time in Stellaris. And then the other issue is that most rocky bodies aren't size 25 barren planets, and instead have limits to just how big their deposit can get based on that. Right, so like a size 12 world has a maximum of like 3 nanites per month. And the other problem here, there's a quality of life problem, which is that you can't actually see the size of rocky bodies. There's no way to see it in game. So you have, even if you were to go click, you look at the systems you're thinking about building Harvester Starbases in and click on everybody, you cannot get the information that you need to actually find the best places to build these Harvester Starbases without mods. And that ultimately is the answer, is like there are a number of mods that help with this problem. I have one that adds maximum base nanite production as a tooltip. I think there are others that work more like the expansion planner, where you open a menu and it'll like go find the best systems in your empire that don't have one yet. But what this all means is that it takes a really long time for your nanite production to scale up. You finish the tradition, and then it's going to be another 50 years after that until your Harvester Starbases are at full power. And it's actually worse than that. Well, it's not the complete picture, because there's that clause here, right, around every 5 years, increase the size of the nanites deposit, double it, or yield a sum of nanites. And this is a lump sum, so it's once you get, after 25 years on bodies of size 12 or larger, it turns into a 50-50, where either the deposit doubles its size or it gives you a lump sum of nanites. And these lump sums are actually quite significant. So on a size 12 body that where you get the coin flip that gives you the lump sum, it's like 1,000 nanites. And on a fully scaled up size 25 barren world, it's like 30,000 nanites, right? So these, ultimately what happens is that the doubling of the deposits ends up being a lot less significant than the lump sums that you get every 5 years. But these lump sum amounts are also largely illegible, right? You get a little pop-up that says, like, consumption of whatever body yielded nanites for the swarm, and it doesn't tell you how much. It just kind of quietly goes into your nanite bank and piles up. And if you're not, like, keeping an eye on that, it's kind of easy to lose track of. But again, you can't possibly start getting those lump sums until 25 years after you finish the tradition. And the fact that it's that coin flip means that it increases the time that it takes for your deposits to scale up even further, right? So if it weren't for that, because half the time your deposit scales up, and half the time, instead of scaling up, you get a lump sum. So what this means is that it's probabilistic, right? In expectation, it takes about 80 years for your deposits to fully scale up for size 25 worlds or whatever. But you could just keep getting the lump sum coin flip for a smaller lump sum, right? You could get unlucky. And in practice, if you build enough harvester starbases and get enough large worlds, it evens out. But, you'll have some where you get unlucky and it doesn't finish scaling up for 100 years after you finish the tradition. Let's see, I'll check out my notes. Yeah, so I think the quality of life issues here around not knowing what you're making the income from them unpredictable and illegible, and making finding good systems for them illegible. I think these are kind of fundamental problems, right? Strategy games are about taking the information available to you and using it to make good decisions. And Nanotech doesn't, the game doesn't give you the information that you need to make good decisions about where to deploy your harvesters or to predict what their income will look like. And I think that's kind of fundamentally a problem for a mechanic in a strategy game. And this is something internal. This is about information about governing your own empire's internal affairs and economy. This isn't like, going and doing anomalies and getting RNG there. This is something that should be legible to the player, I think. Other notes on Starbase harvesters. Upkeep. So the upkeep also scales up quietly. The deal with the upkeep is that the base upkeep of a nanite harvester Starbase building is equal to the total base output of the nanite deposits that has added to bodies. And what this means is that your upkeep also quietly climbs as, every 5 years as your deposit sizes double. And this can get you into a lot of trouble where you're playing Nanotech and everything's going great, and your energy economy just kind of gradually crumbles, right, as your harvesters scale up. And it can be hard to figure out what exactly is happening. But that's how harvester upkeep works. Again, it's not in the tooltip. A couple notes on implications here, right? One is that you see here we have a minus 20% from Galactic Ambition. The two traditions that reduce Starbase upkeep, one is Expansion, Starbase upkeep reduction, and the other is Unyielding, has a Starbase upkeep reduction. These are both pretty good for Nanotech. If you're building lots and lots of harvesters, you're putting them in systems that potentially have 100 or 200 base nanite output. If you have 40 harvester starbases, each producing 200 nanites per month, that's 8k energy per month, and you can cut off 40% there, and that's pretty good. The other thing you shouldn't do is go over your starbase cap if you're playing Nanotech, because every starbase over cap that you go increases the upkeep of all of your starbases by 25%. So again, if you have 30 harvester starbases consuming 8,000 energy per month in upkeep, and you go 1 over cap, suddenly you're paying 10,000 energy per month on upkeep. So that can produce very big swings, and you should be very careful about not going over your cap playing Nanotech. And this is a problem that Exterminators already had, right? You're playing Omnicidal, you go conquer an AA Empire, and it's really easy to end up over your cap, because you take all their starbases. And you already kind of had to go through and disband them, because the upkeep was punitive even without these buildings that potentially had 100 energy upkeep per month. Other notes on harvester starbases. They also play because they add mining stations, they play really nicely with all the stuff that boosts mining station output, right? Prosperity is plus 45% here, just from the opener and the blocker. opener and finisher, right? Your Cybrix mining hubs and arc furnaces, your Astra mining drones, Civic, right? You could, if I had it, you could go put the Astra mining buildings in here and one there and get another like plus 100% ish on a fully upgraded Starbase, right? So you can use those techniques to boost your nanite output. Ultimately, however, I think that the large lump sums of nanites, even if you're at plus 100% or plus 200% mining station output, right, and you have a fully upgraded barren world, which has a base output of 50 nanites per month, and you triple that and you're doing 150 nanites per month versus 30,000 nanites every 5 years, I think that still ends up being way more average nanites per month. So yes, you can use those techniques to boost your nanite output, but ultimately they're going to get outscaled by that lump sum output eventually as your deposits continue to scale up. So I guess I would be careful about investing too heavily in those techniques, especially something like Astra mining drones, which carries huge costs. As a gestalt, your research is energy intensive, and then the harvester upkeep is energy intensive. I would be very cautious about taking Astra mining drones and penalizing my technician drone base output in order to boost my mining station output for nanites. So other kind of underdocumented ways to produce nanites, nanite worlds. So nanite worlds are something that you can get by, there's a decision that you get on worlds that you've taken called Subsume World. This starts a situation, and every year as the situation progresses, it creates these blockers that, they block a district and they produce nanites every month. And that's cool, right? You go take lots of worlds and you subsume them and you get these harvest basins that give you nanites every month. And the magnitude is not huge, but kind of early in the life cycle of your ascension, right? It's not terrible, right? You look at a harvester starbase on 15 bodies giving you 1.5 nanites per month versus you subsume one world and it's, even a size 13 world, you're getting 6 nanites per month. So it's not bad. It has no energy upkeep, so that's great. Again, there is another illegible lump sum mechanic happening here, where so every year as the situation progresses, it creates 2 of these harvest basins, and it also gives you a lump sum of nanites when that happens. And the amount of that lump sum is based on your total monthly nanite income, right? Like this number here before any consumed, just the produced. And it is between 2 and 3 times your monthly net income with a minimum of 200 and a maximum of like 3,000 or something like that. And there's an edge case for odd number of districts. But the big picture here is that for every 6 worlds that you are subsuming, these lump sums from the subsumption situation roughly double your monthly nanite income, up to a cap, and if your nanite income is really bad, that 200 nanite floor could be an awful lot of nanites for you at that point in the game. But again, it's not documented. It doesn't. Nothing in the game tells you this, and the fact that it's based on your monthly nanite income is just the craziest spooky action at a distance thing, right? This doesn't make any sense in the game world that because I'm producing nanites at a harvester starbase on the other side of the galaxy and consuming this world here, I get more nanites from consuming this world. What the heck were they thinking? And I think the logic here is that a lot of event pop-ups give you resources scaled based on your monthly output, right? Like you go do an anomaly and it gives you some amount of physics research based on your current monthly physics income. Okay, fine. Again, that's anomalies. That's like RNG mad science. That's not like a core piece of my economy working in this weird like causality breaking way. So I don't love that. But these lump sums of nanites from subsuming worlds early in the Ascension are really useful for getting research labs and edicts and things like that kind of off the ground. Ultimately, though, 3,000. Even if you're, well, I guess if you have, well, let's say 500 nanites once a year, right, is not that much in ship terms, because a nanite swarmer costs like 500 nanites. Actually, I'm going to get to ships in just a second. There's one other way to produce nanites that I want to talk about first, just briefly, because it's bad. And that is using your menial drones to produce nanites. Actually, one other note about subsuming worlds first as well. The other issue, something to watch out for with subsuming worlds is that when that annual event hits, right, where it creates the blockers and it gives you a lump sum of nanites, it also produces a bunch of devastation. And on large worlds that you're subsuming, this devastation adds up faster than it can be repaired, and by the time you finish the situation, you're going to be at like 90% devastation. So, and which will, it's a 90% penalty to like housing and amenities, and generally is going to make those worlds not very productive, and potentially can cause them to rebel if they have a lot of pops on them. And I think the limit in 3.14 used to be 10. Planets with 10 or fewer pops couldn't rebel. So far, I haven't observed any rebellions as I'm subsuming, but again, I keep my worlds being subsumed at pretty low pops, so I wouldn't, just kind of a habit that I built up back in 3.14. So I suspect it's probably true that worlds with low populations can't rebel, but don't go subsuming like load-bearing pieces of your early game energy economy. It's like, okay, we got the subsume worlds button, now I'm going to hit it on all my planets. Stop and think for a second first. Is this planet important, and do I need this to be productive in order to keep everything running? Maybe don't subsume it just yet. Once subsumption is done, nanite worlds now are pretty awesome. They're basically budget machine worlds. You get lots of flexibility with your secondary districts, including raw resource districts. They give tons of jobs per district, and you have 100% habitability. The one thing that's bad about them is their designations. The designations available to them are very limited. Machine World Foundry is fine. It doesn't help you in a lot of cases, but Nanotech World is an active penalty most of the time, right? Just for the building upkeep. An extra 10% building up, most of the time you're not going to get any benefit from any of the other bonuses, and the building upkeep is just a penalty. So I am switching to all of my Nanite worlds to Foundry kind of by default. I think outside of special cases, that's usually what you want to do. And this does put them significantly behind machine worlds, right? Having the ability to go like Tech World and ascend it to get to minus 40% technician upkeep, that's can save you a lot of resources. Whereas here, I can't really gain much by ascending most of these worlds, but if you're playing super wide, you probably don't want to be ascending too much anyway. Okay, that's actually all I have to say about Nanite worlds. The last way to produce nanites is using your menial drones, working raw resource jobs. This tradition reduces their base output of food and minerals and gives them some base output of nanites. This is terrible. The amounts of nanites that this produce is very small. Yes, before you get any harvester scale up, like these look kind of okay, but if you think about a nanite harvester costs you 1 energy for 1 nanite, roughly, with no mining station output bonuses and no Starbase upkeep reductions. These are worse than that, much worse than that, where like this costs you 1 mineral per month for 0.2 nanites per month. So the opportunity cost here is just much greater. You're paying a lot more for these nanites, plus you're spending the opportunity cost of pops. And if you're in this wide situation, you don't have enough pops to work all the worlds that you might have. And these menial drone jobs were already jobs that you didn't really want, right? Food, you want to be getting from hydroponics bays. Minerals, you want to be getting from mining stations. You don't want to be working these jobs. You want your actual real pops to go be researchers or metallurgists or whatever. So these this takes like kind of a bad jobs and makes them worse. So as far as I'm concerned, this tradition is a penalty, and it's just something that like happens to you as you're playing Nanotech, and there really isn't anything to be done about it. And the amounts of nanites produced, I mean, how much am I producing from jobs? It's not much, right? It's just such an insignificant amount relative to the amount produced by stations and blockers, which are themselves much smaller than the amounts produced by lump sums. So the output on this is just awful. And the Nanite World designation naturally leans into that and buffs this output slightly while further penalizing your menial drone jobs. And again, these bonuses are not big enough to take that base output and make it meaningful. The base output, it should be 1, right? Like, if this were -1 mineral per month and +1 nanites per month instead of +0.2, then we might be talking. You know, that would be an amount worth thinking about, and maybe worth using the designation for, but as they are right now, you mostly ignore this. So those are the 3 ways you can produce nanites. You cannot buy them on the market. The only way to get nanites is to actually produce them. So how about spending nanites? The big one, obviously, is ships. We get two hull types. The Swarmer is kind of like a Corvette, right? It's a small ship. It's relatively fast. It's quite flimsy. The Interdictor is more like a cruiser. And as you can see, they have no upkeep, right? The issue here is that, say you go build 1,000 nanite swarmers, and you go way over your naval cap. The problem is that this increases the upkeep of everything else in your fleet, including your civilian ships. So you kind of can't mix nanite fleets with alloy fleets. If you're going to actually use the strength of nanite fleets, which is numbers, you have to produce lots of them and probably go way over your naval cap. And this means that the upkeep on any alloy ships you have is going to be very expensive. So that's not great. And then the other issue that I think relates to the naval cap stuff is war exhaustion. Nanite ships are very flimsy, right? It's 50 hull points, 100 armor, and you get no slots to put extra defensive components in. Whereas Corvette is 200 hull and with some armor is more. So this Corvette is 3 times as durable as a nanite swarmer. Corvettes are also faster, and I forget whether they get more evasion or not. But so nanite ships are quite flimsy and quite expensive, and right, the flimsiness ties into war exhaustion, where if you play nanite, you are often going to take losses, and when you take losses of nanite ships, you often take quite a bit of losses, and it's really easy to just get war exhaustion out of wars. And I think what's happening there is that the amount of war exhaustion applied on fleet losses is in some way a function of your naval capacity. So losing, if your naval capacity is 250 and you lose 250 swarmers, that's 100% war exhaustion, except you had another 1,000 swarmers. But you can get white pieced out of wars really easily playing huge nanite fleets due to this war exhaustion problem. And amusingly, this creates an interesting synergy where the Become Crisis Ascension perk, one of the things that it gives you is a war exhaustion reduction, and it's 75%. It's a big magnitude. And that can actually be really good for nanites. If you want to play nanite fleets, Become Crisis is actually, it's quite nice for reducing your war exhaustion gain. I talked about, they have no upkeep, but this comes with its own problems because they don't have upkeep, but everything else does. And then they're a little bit slow for their hull size, they're quite flimsy, and they're very expensive, right? The base cost of a swarmer, so a worse Corvette, right, is 500 nanites. And if you look at the production that you're going to get from consuming worlds and harvester starbases and all this stuff, right, fielding lots and lots of nanite swarmers really early is going to be really hard, right? So I think this game, I finished Nanotech Traditions again 15 to 20 years ago. Haven't really been spending nanites, and I've banked up around 50k. So that's 100 swarmers. And these are not super strong, and again, they die really easily. If you want to build, 2,000 swarmers, it's going to take a really long time to scale up your nanite production to the point where you can do that. And kind of my thinking on these, and part of the reason that I don't really play nanite fleets, is that by the time I have the nanite bank and the nanite income to build enough nanite fleet to justify switching away from my existing alloy fleets, whether that means, sending them into hopeless battles and losing them, or disbanding them or whatever, the game's already decided, right? If I, finish Nanotech Ascension in 2265, and it takes 75 years for my harvester starbases to scale up to the point where I can switch to a pure nanite fleet, that you're talking 2340, 2350, right? Is that math right? Yeah, 2340, I think 75 years. At which point, I have battleships and titans and mega engineering, and 2350, I'm gonna go fight fallen empires, right? So, by that point, kind of what's the point? It becomes available very early, but becoming available in sufficient quantity to justify its downsides comes much, much, much later. Other notes on nanite fleets. The one nice thing about these is that they do let you get hangar slots on a small chassis and like stack up tons and tons of hangar slots. So that's kind of nice, because strikecraft are pretty good. The issue is frame rate, right? If you have 1,000 nanite swarmers, each with a hangar bay and 8 strikecraft, that's an awful lot of moving parts in a particular battle in a particular system, and that can be lag-inducing. The reason interdictors got added to the game was to mitigate lag issues playing Nanotech, but these are even more expensive, right? 7,500 nanites, and this is the cost of 15 swarmers, and it might be as durable as 15 swarmers, but it doesn't have the firepower of 15 swarmers either. So, I don't know. I guess another thing to note about nanite fleets is that they don't have strategic resource build costs from components. So if you have Fallen Empire tech and you want to just take all the dark matter components and put them on your nanite stuff, you can do that, and you don't need dark matter to feed it, so that's cool. It would play really nicely with Archaeotech for like nano missiles, but they don't get small slots. And neither do so the interdictors get small slots that you could fill with the Archaeotech missiles. But anyway, so nanite fleets, that it's in theory they're infinitely powerful. In practice, they have a lot of kind of quality of life issues, sharp edges, and the lead time to produce the nanites to really switch to them and commit to them is very, very long. In the meantime, right, in the time that it takes for your nanite pipeline to get to the point where you can switch to nanite fleet, what are you doing? You're sitting here waiting for your harvester starbases to scale up and subsuming worlds. What else can nanotech do for you in that time? Spending small amounts of nanites that don't set you back too far. And the big thing now is research labs. These nanite research complex, that's the upgraded one, but the nanite research facility and nanite research complex buildings, these are amazing. If huge base output boosts to all researchers, and they're not planet limited, right? We can spam them. And yeah, they add some nanite upkeep to your researchers, but ultimately it's not really that much in the big scheme of things, right? If you're talking about 500 nanites for a Corvette equivalent, 20 nanites per month is what, like, kind of it sets you back one swarmer every 2 years or something. And in exchange, you get a huge boost to science output. So, like, that's a pretty good deal. The issue here is, and this is a big buff. In 3.14, these were, like, kind of okay. They would give you nanotech researchers that had their output shifted slightly towards engineering and had nanite upkeep on the jobs. They were pretty decent for non-gestalt, so like individualist machines, because the upkeep on the researchers was like half the consumer goods upkeep of a regular researcher plus a nanite. So like if you had nanites to burn, you would come out ahead. For Gestalts, it was the same amount of energy as a calculator plus a nanite. So your output of like research per input raw resources was worse. So they weren't really worth using. But now, totally worth using. The trouble here is around trade deficits. So in 4.0, if you have a planet that runs a deficit of any single resource, this ultimately costs you trade, right? You can see here we have trade consumed to pay for planetary deficits, and the ratio here is every 8 points of a basic raw resource costs you 1 point of trade per month in deficit logistics funding, and then like alloys are like worth 4 times as much and cost you half a point. I forget what strategics are, and then rare resources cost you 2.5 points of trade per month per point of planetary deficit, which means that if you have these tech worlds that are you're spamming these research labs on and adding lots of nanite upkeep to all of your researchers, these deficits are very expensive, right? This is 50 trade right here per month, and if I were building more research labs, it'd be a lot higher. So this is especially bad for Gestalts, where our ability to produce trade is quite bad. Logistics drones produce half of the trade output of a trader for individualists. We don't get any of the galactic stock market equivalent, trade output booster stuff. So funding these trade deficits can be quite challenging for Gestalts, and that's the main reason that I haven't gone and spammed these labs yet. And this is another reason to want to stack up upkeep production, right? If I didn't have the research supply depot, this would be 26 nanites per month and 60 or something trade per month. So stacking up planetary ascension on a tech world with research supply depots and discoveries minus 20% researcher upkeep can save you a lot of trade if you're using that at research labs. So something to think about with these. Overall, though, I think these are very good and totally worth using, and the trade is just like something that you work around or deal with. The other good use for nanites while you're scaling up your nanite production is edicts. So these get unlocked in the finisher. As well, there's also one edict that gets unlocked as soon as you have nanite income, and it's nanite actuators. It's plus 10% research speed for plus 10% calculators upkeep for a pretty small amount. It's a small lump sum and then a small upkeep. So this is quite good for what it costs. The other 3 edicts are plus 25% naval cap, plus 25% monthly alloy output, and plus 50% monthly energy credits. And what's interesting about these is that they all apply to non-pop sources, right? If you have a Dyson sphere and you activate nano-connected generators, it goes from 4,000 energy per month to 6,000 energy per month. And this is applied at each source, right? So, I think it stacks additively with like mining station energy output modifiers. It stacks additively with job modifiers, right? If you have capacity subsidies and nano-connected generators, it's effectively plus 100% from jobs. But still, this just produces an awful lot of energy. And again, the upkeep numbers are very doable. The lump sums, this is what I use my lump sums from consuming worlds on, right? Is starting these edicts. Because it's about the right order of magnitude, right? If I'm consuming a bunch of worlds, I'm going to get, low tens of thousands, tens of thousands of nanites, which would buy me like, tens of nanite ships, or I could kick off these edicts and like get a bunch of economy bonuses that will then help me run the alloy fleet while I wait for the nanite fleet to scale up. So these are quite good. The joke in 3.14 was that Nanotech was actually an empire size reduction and 3 really good edicts, and that was like what the Ascension gave you. And that's no longer true because the research buildings are awesome and the nanite worlds are awesome, and they come online a lot earlier than machine worlds. But the edicts are still really good and totally worth using. And the fact that I hadn't activated them yet in this game was totally a mistake, and I absolutely should Other stuff you can spend nanites on. So we get these other buildings besides the labs. We get the Nanotech Cauldron, and we get this research option for nanite transmutation, which gives the Nanotech transmuter, which produces strategic resources. So these are buildings that provide popless production. As I said, this was kind of a theme of Nanotech. For going super wide, you take worlds, and then you build these buildings instead of having pops there that work jobs. And these haven't survived patch 4.0 super well. It's not that they're... So let's talk about the transmuter first. What has changed? The transmuter hasn't changed. Transmuter is still, 5 energy and 1 nanite per month for 6 total strategic resources, which is pretty good. The issue is kind of the strategic resource environment surrounding it, where refineries have gotten super duper buffed, where now they add strategic resource production to all of your metallurgists. So it's now possible, basically the upside of refining is now higher, right? It no longer costs pops, really, to do refining. You don't need to go spend, allocate a world just to refining strategic resources. You do it on the forge worlds that you were going to have anyway, and they benefit from the upkeep reduction to metallurgists that you were going to have anyway, and all of the metallurgist output bonuses that you were going to have anyway, right? I noticed this today, that you get plus 10% motes output from the tech that gives you plus 10% metallurgist output, right? So there's kind of more synergy happening here with the rest of the system. And then the other thing is that I think the demands for strategic resources are also higher, primarily due to these lab buildings that add strategic resource upkeep to your researchers. I have, right now, I'm consuming 40 crystals per month just from jobs, right? That would not have happened in 3.14. And the transmuters, if I'm trying to transmute for all my strategics, which was what you would do previously, is you would just skip the refinery techs and just spam the nanite transmuters. That's an awful lot of transmuters to feed that kind of consumption from researchers, and it's just from engineers on this one world primarily. Before you would have a little bit of gas upkeep from the upgraded labs to produce calculator jobs, but it would be 2 gas upkeep for 6 jobs, whereas now it's 0.5 gas upkeep per job, which is somewhat higher. And you can also scale science up a lot more rapidly by just building all these districts. So I think demands are up. The ability to produce strategics by other means is stronger than it used to be. I don't think the transmuters are terrible, but am I going to go spend the engineering research on them? If I wanted to get... maybe it's a timing thing partly, is that now in 4.0, these upgraded labs are really good. And I want to have these earlier, probably before I would be finishing Nanotech Traditions. And in order to do that, I need to have the refining techs, because the transmuter comes too late. It might be a justification for skipping the transmuter. Arguably, if you're Unity rushing, if you just want to go all in on Unity to get Nanotech finished as fast as possible, to get these Harvester Starbases scaling up as fast as possible, which is probably what you should do, you could skip. You could skip the refining techs, you could skip the upgraded labs. I am not willing to Unity rush that hard. I don't like to do that. So, but that might be the correct way to play here. So I think the transmuter is kind of questionable now. It used to be a really easy sell. Now it's and the other building you get from Nanotech for pop free production is... Oop, that's not it. This is my world that has all the engineer upkeep. Is the Nanotech Cauldron. And these were considered kind of marginal in 3.14. The way that they work is they just have energy upkeep and nanite upkeep, and they produce alloys every month. And you can turn them off if you don't need them. They are quite expensive in terms of alloy. right? It costs like 500 alloys to build one of these things. And they're also fairly expensive in terms of upkeep. And what has changed here, so I kind of like these before. With a governor like the Oracle, you stack up building upkeep productions, and then you build lots of these, and they're like kind of okay. The issue now is that the optimization building exists, and Nanite worlds give lots of jobs, and you put the optimization building in a double heavy industry world, and you get like 300 jobs per district that you build worked automatically for you, and the energy upkeep here. So if we turned off the refineries, right, and we just focused on the alloy part of the question, then a new district here cost me 275 minerals, which is a lot less than 500 alloys for a Nanite Cauldron, and the combined energy upkeep from the optimization building and the district itself is like 10 energy per month with some reductions. And then we're looking at 13 minerals per month for 15 alloys per month, roughly. Versus, one of these is 25 energy per month for 15 alloys per month. So it's pretty close, except for like the build cost and yeah. So I guess by the time optimization buildings come out, I don't know that Nanotech Cauldrons have a niche anymore. Before optimization buildings come out, maybe these are worth using instead of spamming heavy industry districts with the optimization building. But they were marginal before. I think they're still pretty marginal now. And then the final way to spend your nanites in relatively low amounts while you're waiting for ships to come out is on these nanite components, the autocannon, repair system, and flak battery, which are techs that you get guaranteed in engineering. These aren't terrible. The components themselves are decent, right? The nanite repair system is like a double strength regenerative hull tissue. The nanite autocannon is like you take the maximum strength autocannon, then you upgrade it one level more. And again, likewise, the flak battery is like a top tier flak battery that has then been upgraded one more step. The issues here, right, is that flak batteries and autocannons aren't like super strong components to start with. Maybe there are niches for these in the multiplayer meta, but in single player, right, I'm focusing on bypass weapons, right? I'm focusing on disruptors and nanite cloud missiles and strikecraft and missiles, stuff that ignores shields and sometimes also ignores armor. So doing the autocannon like extra shield damage thing doesn't really help me. Also, you have to get awful close to things to use autocannons. And if you're doing this with a nanite fleet in particular, you're going to lose a lot of nanites doing that. Part of the reason that hangars are so good on nanite swarmers is that swarmers are fragile. So you pick the weapon that gives you the maximum engagement range, rather than one with a short engagement range where you're going to take lots of losses. So I don't think the autocannons have much of a place in a nanite fleet, and I don't think they have a whole lot of place in a conventional fleet either for single player. And it's just an awful lot of engineering research for kind of a niche weapon. Flak batteries, likewise, the AI doesn't really mass carriers, right? Flak batteries are nice against the Great Tempest and Fallen Empires and the Pretherin and like some of these kind of crisis-y type enemies. But this is not something that you need early, right? By the time that you're going up against most of those enemies, you could switch into nanite fleets if you wanted. And again, it's very expensive. And the repair system also has no place in a nanite fleet, where if your ships have 50 hull, you don't get a chance to regenerate. You get hit and it dies. Personally, I kind of like this on battleships, right? The base regeneration is quite low, so you're boosting a small number, but not having to stop at a starbase to repair is kind of nice if you have big, slow battleships that are slow to get to a starbase, and you would rather just keep pushing forward into enemy territory. So, I kind of like regenerative hull tissue and nanite repair systems. But again, it's a lot of engineering research for kind of a niche tech. None of these are like things that make you stop and go, yeah, I'm going to put off battleships or impulse thrusters or any of the stuff that's coming, the critical engineering techs that are coming out in that gap between when you finish your Ascension and when you're ready to switch into Nanites, right? No, these aren't showstoppers. So, you know, it's not amazing. All that aside, right? There's been a lot of negativity here. I will say, Nanotech in 4.0 is probably the strongest it's ever been, right? The research labs are super strong now. The Nanite worlds come out way earlier than machine worlds. They're free to make. You can spam them. And they're almost as good as machine worlds, right? There are some niche use cases like stacking up researcher upkeep reductions where they don't have the designations to do that effectively. But if you want to just like have some good worlds that get lots of jobs per district and you're not doing anything super fancy like that with them, they're good. Interstellar Dominion, excuse me. This Ascension perk got an Empire Size from Systems effect added to it in 4.0. And this is amazing for Nanotech, because you're going to go take lots of systems, and you're going to take the Empire Size from Systems, and now you can reduce that dramatically. So that was a great kind of indirect buff to this play style that Nanotech wants to play. And then finally, the automation and optimization buildings, in combination with the Nanotech world buffs, are a huge buff to Nanotech's ability to play in the pop-free style or low population density style that it wants to play in. I can take these worlds and build optimization buildings and spam districts, and I don't need pops to work the jobs because the districts are so job dense that the automation or the optimization building is totally worth it. And that was not true when 4.0 first came out and Nanite worlds were awful. It will probably stop being true at some point. The devs have said that they want to revisit the automation and optimization buildings upkeep. Currently, there are some issues in calculating it, and having the upkeep calculated based on number of districts is an expedient, right? It's a stopgap until they can have it calculated based on the number of jobs it's actually working instead. So at some point, this will probably stop being as efficient. But for now, it's amazing. Yeah, so like, Nanite has gotten a lot of things, has gained a lot of strength in 4.0. The main problems that it has is that it's just really slow, right? You get the Ascension out, and then you wait another 50 to 100 years for it to really spin up and give you the power spike that you wanted from it. Outside of the research lab, that part comes out early, which is great, but getting the fleet that was one of the selling points of Nanotech takes a really long time. And that's kind of bad versus, if you're comparing with Virtuality, for example, where Virtuality's power spike hits as soon as you finish the Ascension, maybe slightly before. Modularity's power spike hits pretty close after you finish the Ascension, right? You finish the Ascension and you go do the engineering research project to like model your pops, and suddenly your economy is a lot stronger than it was. Nanite just takes a lot longer, and time has a lot of value in Stellaris. So there's the speed issue. There are quality of life problems around finding good harvester sites, lump sums of income that are basically illegible and hard to plan around. Okay, sorry, I've jumped to the wrong spot. The war exhaustion issues, and the optimization building has been a mixed blessing because micromanaging jobs on planets using the optimization building is really annoying. Because let's say we turn off like all these menial drone jobs. I build a new district, and then it's gonna boost the open jobs by the total number of jobs provided by the district, rather than by the half of that the optimization building will work for me. So what this means is that you go spam these districts, and then you have to come back to these planets and squeeze pops out. That's not a good example. Well, that's this one, for example. Do I really want these engineers here? It's fine, but they're not as productive as they would be in habitats. Here I've been repeatedly having to squeeze out logistics drones, right? So there's an extra layer of kind of repeated job micromanagement involved in using the optimization building on all these Nanite worlds. which is somewhat annoying. And again, it's just a quality of life problem. It would be great if, if I were using optimization buildings and I built a new district and it only increased the open jobs by the amount that was going to be worked automatically. If it were already at the amount that was going to be worked automatically, it's something like that. There's room for improvement there. I think kind of stepping back from these concrete issues in the game, Nanotech is a little bit conceptually incoherent, right? It's there's a layer of like Grey Tempest role-playing where like you build lots of nanite ships and roll over everyone, and that's cool. But then they took everything else. They took everything in the game that touched nanites or was related to nanites and tried to shove it into this Ascension, right? So we got the Grey Nanite ship set, or the Grey Tempest ship set. We got the Scavenger bot techs. We got the Nanite transmuter. We got Nanite worlds, but they're really weird Nanite worlds that aren't the same as Nanite worlds that you get in the L cluster. And then we got like just a bunch of other like weird stuff, like Starbase. The Harvester Starbases are completely unrelated to any of that kind of canonical Nanotech stuff from the rest of Stellaris, and it just feels like they kind of didn't go through and slim it down to the stuff that really needed to be here. And that's part of why so many pieces of Nanotech kind of don't matter, right? Is that they were thrown in for completeness because that was already a Nanotech thing that was in the game, not because it's something that you really want or that works with everything else in the Ascension. And then kind of the final problem with Nanotech is that playing super wide and managing all of the planets isn't actually fun. If you take all of the worlds and you consume all of them, it's a lot of worlds to manage, and it leads to a lot of micromanagement or a lot of underutilization, right? I have nanite worlds that I'm not even using because I just haven't gotten around to figuring out what they need to be or what I need, and going and building stuff on them to do that. And this was true in my previous playthrough as well, where I conquered the whole galaxy and had like 100 planets by the end of the game, and a lot of them were just sitting there producing nanites and taking up empire size from districts and upkeep. It's a lot to conquer the entire galaxy, and there's a reason that most playthroughs don't go to a full map painting, because it's not that much fun. It's something you do once or twice, and then you go, boy, that was a project, right? By the end, it's kind of a slog, and you just want to be done. And what's funny here, taking and managing all the planets doesn't help. And what's funny is that they got this right with Terravore, right? Terravore, you take the planet and you consume the planet, and then the planet explodes, and you don't have to manage the planet for the rest of the game. Nanotech, you take the planet and you consume the planet, and suddenly it becomes an awesome planet with these super dense districts, and you feel like you should be using it for the rest of the game. And I almost feel like an alternate universe, like more polished, more fun version of Nanotech would look more like Terravore. I think they really wanted to make it different from Terravore, and they made it different, but not in a good way, right? I think if they had, you consume a planet and it turns into a nanite world that kicks all your pops off, no longer habitable, and it gives you, that planet now has like a 25 or 50 point mining station deposit for nanites, and maybe that interacts with harvesters in some way, right? Like, I think that could have been a lot more fun. That could still have played into Nanite's pop-free production, super wide strategy, right? And then you turn your core sector worlds into conventional machine worlds using buildings that give pops lots of nanite upkeep or something, right? Like, I think that we didn't get the most fun version of Nanite Ascension that could have been, while still kind of retaining its identity as a super wide Ascension that consumes worlds and builds really big fleets. And that makes me sad, but there's always modders, conceivably, or maybe someday Paradox will come back and the custodians will take a good hard look at Nanotech and think about it some more. So anyway, but I guess it's interesting to note that all these problems that Nanotech had, the fact that it's really slow, the quality of life issues, the conceptual smorgasbord issue, and the lack of fun in managing all the planets issue, these were all things that Nanotech had in 3.14, right? This stuff has all been true before. It's still true in 4.0. It's maybe a little bit worse due to optimization building micromanagement, but at least we get more mechanical numerical power for it now, so that's nice, I guess. Yeah, okay. I think that's everything I have to say about Nanotech. Thank you for watching.